All right, everybody. So we are live. So welcome back, everybody. So sorry with technical difficulties, like we're trying new things, going into new, realms. So this stuff happens. But thanks everybody so much for coming. I don't want to take too much extra time because I know our special guest speaker here wants to get going on everything. So I just want to see if we can just give a nice warm round of applause for our guest speaker, Brett Powers from Chewy.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you all for having me. Apologize, trying to get us so I work for Chewy, obviously, and I work in the healthcare services division and part of what's called Connect with a Vet. And so the interesting part about Chewy is we are modernizing the way that veterinary medicine is conducted today by doing what we call teleconsultation. And so I set up an appointment with a vet so you can kind of see like a demo of the environment of how the service works. But hopefully she'll come back online and multiple IT issues trying to connect FAU in it, and then she lost connection with me once I accidentally hit end. So maybe we'll circle back at the end and we'll be able to do it. She's gonna try to figure it out. But anywho, so I'm the associate director for workforce management for Chewy. And what does that mean is my realm is around payroll, scheduling, demand scheduling, and we're kind of in the Silicon Valley term, like the product manager for workforce applications. And so we just try to, long story short, we try to meet that customer demand with associates working. So when we have, and same thing when I used to work in retail when I was here last time, same kind of thing with retail stores, doing it digitally online here, we're meeting that customer and associate demand. So a little bit about me. I do have a son who's 2, married. I have a cat and a dog and a stray cat that lives outside and a giant birdhouse at the moment. So yeah, it's like have fun and good things. So I think how I want to kind of talk about today is just a little bit about Chewy and then probably double that on like career kind of stuff. So generally my background has been so far is I used to work for Publix back in the day as hourly management. And then before that, I was on active component Army. I was enlisted up to staff sergeant, and I was a generator mechanic on active duty. And then I came back, I finished my degree in engineering, and then I commissioned into the Army Reserves as an engineer officer. I'm going to be a captain by the end of this year on that. And so hey, thank you. So it's kind of like being Batman. So on my Batman weekend job with the Army Reserve, we do a lot of construction projects. I actually just came back last year from working in Kuwait as part of that Afghanistan pullout, and we're out there doing civil work projects in the Middle East. So very diverse, a lot of fun. Definitely a good career move, especially if you're interested. Really, to your guys' field, now they have what they call, before it used to just be Signal, which is like the Army IT. But now they actually have the cyber division, which is very different. And it's not all James Bondy. It's more around like electronic warfare and doing like counter electronic warfare, like signaling and jamming and things like that. And it actually involves being out in the field and not necessarily behind a computer. So if you are interested in that, always we can talk about it after or go visit ROTC and things like that. But awesome, another great career field as well. I'm running 18 years with that. And then in my early years, when I was just a junior engineer, I did work for inside aviation maintenance, doing aircraft maintenance down in Miami National Airport. And then I joined Office Depot when I came here the first time as a junior or senior level engineer, and made my way up to principal. And now I joined Chewy as a director for workforce management. So it's a little bit on my life. But with all that, I get to kind of travel the world, especially with the armed forces. I think I've been to, I've been to more than half of 3/4 of the states in the US, but Korea, South Korea, Ireland, Germany, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Bulgaria. So been a lot of different places. So I'm here, I was used to, can't see on the bottom here, I'll move it. I used to take a lot of photos when I was with Office Depot, got to travel a lot. So I used to start taking photos of every store that we used to go visit. So I think I visited maybe 50 or 60 different stores on the East Coast. With Chewy being remote, we don't get to travel as much, but we do have offices in all the major cities, Boston, Seattle, and Texas. So again, I was just briefly talking about Chewy. So or on the everybody knows about the e-commerce side where we sell products very similar to Amazon. But on the pharmacy and healthcare services is where Chewy is growing tremendously. And connected to that is the product right now that I support and work on. But we have several other products inside of healthcare services, such as the insurance business, which is called Care Plus. And then, well, not very well known, but the pharmacy side, especially inside the compound. So there's been a big push to hire on veterinary professionals to kind of build out these services and really find fun, neat ways to take care of our pet parents and provide such specialized services. So it's kind of a pleasure and honor to be part of this team and to kind of help build out some of these things and how we're changing the way veterinary medicine is or veterinary practice is done. And yeah, it's very innovative and a lot of fun. So if you're interested, I go on it and just kind of check it out. It's really quite fascinating. So I guess, so going to the career part, it's kind of hard to get into where you're looking at careers, especially with Chewy, right? And how we think about how we develop. This is kind of how I see it. It kind of lives in food products. And then when I work for other Fortune 500 companies, it's very similar where you have in the Silicon Valley companies, it's called engineering. They don't have IT per se. And then if it's a traditional Fortune 500 company, they call it IT, right? And inside these departments, they have, the applications and then the data warehouse and security. And so, as you're looking for jobs when you graduate, that may be a good spot to look into if you're interested in something very technical, right? And then in the product side is a little different, also technical, but not necessarily a technical background. In these traditional companies like Chewy, you'd work on like what you see connected that was trying to do before, and be part of that, and be part of the engineering team to work on building out that product. Or you could be what they call like the product developers, which you're building out that story, working with UX developers, engineering, more of the business side to kind of see what the future is and build that out. And then in the traditional setting, it's very similar, but it may be more around dashboard developing and other like IT services that are internally developed, or working with vendors to kind of connect the systems together. And then another big piece is operations, where I spent most of my career. IT or engineering usually calls us the business, and the business is what business and product can be interchangeable depending on what it is. But on the operations side, it's also very interesting. In the Fortune 500 companies, including Chewy, it can be very different. It could be a call center. You could be part of the e-commerce site. In our case, it's like veterinarians. In prior lives, it was the retail stores, or there's other business-to-business components as well. So yes, that's operations. So, and I think a newer developing piece is this data science BI aspect. Chewy has a huge data science team that builds out these dashboards and looks through the data for analytics and insights. And that team's always growing and always recruiting. But this is where I think some of the other traditional Fortune 500 companies kind of fail, is they don't necessarily have this capability developed internally. And so you'll see in a lot of traditional companies, it'll be more of what they call data analytics teams, and they'll be trying to get into data science, but don't quite get there. They're more focused on dashboarding, BI, and scorecards, whereas companies like Chewy be more focused on some of the advanced techniques of data science and trying to integrate them into the services. Hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of an overview of what like Chewy looks like internally from like an operational standpoint, and then how other Fortune 500 companies are kind of set up in the same way. All right, so this one I kind of developed because I feel like when going through programs, nobody really kind of like spreads out like what a career path kind of looks like independent. And these fields are huge. So you could be stuck, not stuck, but you could specialize in one particular thing and spend your whole career there, right? But it's fun to go. So in my mind, how I see it, and it's how I kind of navigated through my career, is you really do your career on like two aspects. Like one's the people skills, if you want to be a people manager, and then the other one is like this tech skills on the side. And Google, Amazon, they all try to really pushed for this. They talked about like senior VP level technical developers that don't have any direct reports, but they oversee very large systems and compensate as such. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you minimize for like cancer?
Absolutely.
And then my other question is, where did you start with the chart?
So my undergrad is industrial systems engineering. So I started off at, if you would add a third, it would be somewhere in like engineer analyst, similar to developer. A little bit different pathway, but it's very, very similar. And at some points, I've spent career in reporting, or I spent good chunks of my career in reporting analytics, dashboarding, and project management aspects. But I started, you could call it analyst level. I didn't hop into, I guess, develop or task per se, because when I worked in aviation, there's no necessarily developers. It wasn't until I joined Office Depot where I started honing some of these technical skills, especially Snowflake, and working to develop workforce applications. It was more of the on the physical side. But yeah, so I see it here as two aspects: is people skills and technical skills. And the further down the technical side you get, right, it'll be more into software development, being on the engineering team, things like that. And versus the extreme on the people side, you'll be, some sort of director like myself, or a product manager. You may not be hands into the code. And then there's all this kind of in between, which are, I think, key development points in trying to get to some of these positions, especially the senior manager or director level. And then some are maybe personal interests. At least for me, as kind of example, I was an engineer, and then I spent some time on the Office Depot reporting analytics team, and then we did dashboarding. I learned how to do Blue Prism for automation. And then at some points we were launching projects. I ended up becoming like a pseudo project manager. Well, I definitely was a project manager for industrial engineering applications, and at some point became like a product manager, so to speak, for Office Depot's workforce tools, and worked a lot with the IT developers on building out the data requirements that go into the product applications, and also meeting the executive requirements for scorecards and dashboards. And how I had little stopping points is I self-taught R, used that at Office Depot for some of the data science realms. And then I made my way to Chewy, where I finally, landed that director role. So everybody's path is a little different, but all of these are kind of stopping points. And this is not all inclusive. This is just some high level thoughts that I had when I was making it. There's a lot more to this than that. But it's just kind of how I kind of saw the world. And nobody really kind of showed me this, like when I was going through. So I wanted to kind of put my thoughts on here to show you all. A critical skill I do think is not often talked about, and is usually left inside the School of Finance, is modeling. If you become very good, and it's usually done in Excel, but if you become very good at modeling, that could really help you on this data science analytic track. And it can feed into certain software development aspects as well. A good part of my job now is to model out how our workforce looks, mathematically, and then looking at the customer demand to make sure those two are put together. So some of it's a lot of assumptions and understanding how aspects of the physical world work, and then modeling them into the digital world, and helping other managers and executives make good business outcome decisions based on that. And a lot of that's very the same for software. You'll see Amazon does a lot of this as well on the e-commerce side. A lot of those algorithms around selecting products, decisions, things like that. A lot of that's initially modeled out first, and then taken to the developers for to put into production, so to speak. Okay. So this is my last slide, a little short and sweet, and see if we can get that back on. Just some general takeaways from, I think, how from a professional standpoint, just kind of like a life mantra, is one, just to kind of be present. I've noticed a lot lately is a lot of people don't answer emails. So if you're just by responding to an email within the same day or a few hours, you could really set yourself apart from your peers and be known to be responsive. There's many times where I've responded within 5 minutes and, because of my phone, and it's like, oh, thank you for the quick response. A lot of people appreciate that. It makes them feel wanted and appreciated. Participate. I know when you're on calls, especially now that we live a very significant Zoom life, and a lot of most of my meetings are all Zoom. So participating in them, being active, actually talking in there, and not just sitting on there as a floating head. Don't waste people's time. This is definitely overlooked. Usually time is shown as excessive meetings, asking silly questions for no reason because you didn't want to read your email, things like that. It's just all part of being present and being active in the business where you work. 2 is make allies. You don't want to be that person that's just rude or they can't come to you with any issues. You want to make yourself an ally, make yourself extremely useful by working with people. If you become very difficult to work with, then nobody wants to bring you on their teams, and it makes just general business part hard. Take on hard tasks. Sometimes you'll get projects, especially in our world, where things are theoretical. Can we do this? Or do you know if we can do this? A lot of people don't want to take on those challenging tasks and try to learn a new skill, a new tech to try to solve a business problem. Even if you're not successful at it, the fact that you tried at it, you'll learn something. And example R for me was that I figured it out and was able to kind of show it off, and it really helps set you apart and taking on some of those challenging tasks. And then eventually they'll come to you when the VP or the executive has a problem. Says, this is a hard task. How do we go about that? Then you'll be that person they come to first instead of somebody else on your team, because you're willing to put in the effort on that task. And you don't always have to be successful either. Briefly talk about learning a new tech. Sometimes it's for fun if you have the personal interest. What I like to do is when I learn something, I like to use work data, especially when I learn R, because I like working on projects that mean something. And so by using your work data for a skill you're learning, it kind of adds applicability to it. And then when you're done using it or learning it, then you could show it to your supervisor and say, hey, I just learned this new skill. Look at this insight I created with this new product. We could probably use it on our team. Instead of just taking a class and checking the block. But yeah, they sound like then, I did Excel advanced. Like, okay, I mean, it's nice, but use work data, you can apply it immediately. And then show and tell. So this is big. I think it's fun. I do a lot of show and tell with my teams, especially if we're learning something new. It's like we show off, say, hey, like, look what we did. And you show the final product of it and everybody kind of learns something. But at the same time, there'll be other junior members on your team that are interested in that skill. And then they'll come to you and say, hey, could you teach me? And then it goes back to number 2, you made an ally. 3, you're not a jerk. And then 3, you took on a hard task, and now you're teaching others, and you're becoming that important go-to type of person. And then 5 is know your customer, not necessarily the person that's spending the product, right? It's most of the time, especially in our world, it's other business partners, peers, people running stores, things like that. It's not necessarily the customer coming in the building. Especially when you get into a large Fortune 500 type of environment, the more you support your initial customer, then at the actual real customer that's spending the dollars downstream will eventually feel that effect. And you'll see that in a lot of unsuccessful or dying businesses. The managers can't steer the ship because, like corporate, for example, doesn't want to support the next layer, and then it just continues to trickle down. So know your customer and be engaged, and always try to help them. And that's it. If anybody has any questions on that. Thank you.
So I guess you could open it up, online or things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead.
Two. One, first one is you said you sell product R. What do you use? Like use like rutabaga or like force?
May have to repeat the question for the guys on.
Yeah, okay. So the question was, how did I kind of self-teach R? To be very honest, YouTube. YouTube and a lot of Google. I found like an R book online, like a PDF, and I looked through it. Wasn't too helpful, but honestly, YouTube is pretty my personal go-to. I fixed my pool pump off YouTube. So I usually go there first because there's always somebody like willing to teach you on there. I think it's a great tool, but generally, not Udemy, but what's the Giant Code website that has all the code? GitHub.
Stack Overflow.
Yeah, Stack Overflow. All those sites, there's always somebody that kind of had a similar problem or snippets of code, and I'd kind of steal from there or get ideas as well. It's a little combination of those. Yep, great question.
I was gonna ask, do you ever feel frustrated when you switch from your original path?
So the question was, do I ever feel frustrated when changing paths or career paths? Absolutely. I think for me, a lot of the professional frustration is when you kind of get stuck in a role. I think that's kind of how I felt maybe in my last role as a principal engineer, is you become that expert, right? So eventually, when you all start your careers, you'll get into a certain career field, like maybe it's HRS. You'll become the expert on Workday or whatever the HR system is, and they'll start coming to you, right, and be like, hey, fix these problems, and you'll know the back end or working with that vendor like the back of your hand. But then at some point you become so specialized that nobody wants to promote you or move you around. And so you'll have to make a personal choice in how you deal with that frustration by either branching out and taking on additional projects outside of your work scope to help broaden, or maybe you're happy there, or maybe change jobs. So in my case, I changed jobs, but I also broadened at the same time. So I guess my answer is yes, you get frustrated. It's all about how you react to it. And my recommendation is to either broaden or think about other positions that can help you broaden or gain skills.
So you said you started with Chewy this year.
Yep.
So how do you think Chewy, or how does Chewy compete with top competitors like Amazon? I know you mentioned that the website is very similar to Amazon, but that you guys are expanding more into the veterinary services and the pharmacy. Do you think that's the competitive advantage that Chewy has now versus Amazon or any other pet supply?
No. So I think and probably other people on my team would agree with me. I think what Chewy does well is the customer service aspect. And that's our super competitive advantage, our superhero power, so to speak. Similar to what like Disney has, also very well known with the engineers and creating that like magical customer service experience. Chewy has a very similar DNA, except taken from an e-commerce perspective that even Amazon hasn't mastered fully. That's where it really comes in. And being being early in my career with Chewy, that's what I've seen too from the inside out. Everybody's very all about the pet parent and how the mentality that we go about things is all about centered around the customer, similar to what Jeff Bezos says in the traditional Amazon methodology, where the customer has a seat at the executive table. I don't think it's as iconic or as cliche as his saying in Amazon, but it is definitely inside the DNA, thought about at every level and every product. Mhm. Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's back on favorite question. Did you already know what burger with like burger store?
Nope. Didn't know any of it. None of it at all. I even didn't know how to install it correctly. Because R has like the background software, and then
our studio,
the IDE. Yeah, I didn't know the difference at the time. I figured it out for sure. I was like, why isn't this running? It just said a command prompt. I was like, this scene. But yeah, that's where it goes back to the YouTube thing. I just saw somebody and she tried to install it. So well, it's great software. Highly recommended. I'm not sure if they teach it. They do. That's good. It's the nice part about R in your careers is R's free. And so the problem I've had is a lot of companies don't want to spend money. So like in my training as an engineer, I learned Arena, which is a big, huge simulation software, and it's fantastic. We can do so many things, model it out. Arena costs $15,000 per year. When I was junior engineer, I brought that to my manager. They literally laughed at me. It was like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, no. So it's like, all right. So then you go back to like what's free. Excel, and then R now, which is such a great thing that they provided for free. And it could do all those advanced capabilities. But yeah, I talked about Excel briefly, but Excel can do a lot more than it is giving credit to, especially if you learn VBA and its automation techniques, especially around modeling.
My question, I had some of the internships and some of those things out in the email to all of them. So can you talk a little bit about some of those like internship opportunities that you may have at your location and plantation within your team or maybe location? Because I know a lot of students now are trying to get summer internships, or a lot of students are getting ready to graduate, so they're kind of looking for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm hiring in my role right now. I posted on my LinkedIn. But generally speaking, there is a ton. If you go on the career sites, Chewy, unlike a lot of the other tech companies, is hiring like crazy because we're growing so fast. So if one of these areas I talked about today, I could talk about more detailed questions, go for the role, look for it, apply for it. It's out there. But for the internships, so Chewy is kind of revamping their internship process. So right now, I put the link on it for a few of them for this year. Next year will be even better if you aren't graduating this year. And then I'll get more involved with that team. So we'll have more fanfare and things around that. I requested some interns this year. And how Chewy kind of works is like typical Fortune 500 company, it's internalized by HR, and they kind of gather all the applicants and they do like a selection process. But inside each group, they get to have some say into it, and they get usually about 4 or 5. And the same thing when I was off, Steve, you get a handful. So if you go to those sites, Chewy has it broken out by kind of skill set, like one's data science, one's engineering, and then one's operations. And when you're in operation, there's those 3 operations, more of like the product side where you're working inside the business with the business owners, developing the products and being on those teams. The data science is strictly with the data science team because it's such a technical role, and they'll be working with the Tableau dashboards and things like that inside that realm. And engineering is straight software engineering, and you'll be on that team working with the developers on building other products like Can I Code a Vet or some of the internal things that are used to support that.
Anybody have anything online on the chat?
If we see, well, probably we'll see a position that we like, can we apply for more than one position at a time, or is it only strictly one position and see how that goes?
No, you could apply as many as you like. Yeah. Once you apply to one, you get, at least from Chewy's perspective, you're like in the system. So if somebody looks for things that you're interested in, it'll pop up on the hiring manager's radar. But yeah, apply as many as you want. And if there's someone you're interested in, let me know and I'll submit a referral. Yep.
Where is Chewy headquartered? And how many offices, branch,
Yeah, so Chewy's headquarters, the corporate headquarters is in Plantation where I'm at. And then we have a call center in Hollywood and then a call center in Arizona. And then there's like 3 or 4 DC spread like strategically in the country. And there's 2 or 3 pharmacies. I think one's in New York and Arizona as well, very similar to DC. The other hubs, as they call it, is in Washington, Boston, and then Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And so when you apply for a role, you'll see like a location there. If you see it is tied to one of the hubs, it doesn't mean it's not in corporate, so to speak. It just means that that hiring manager is open for you to work, not necessarily at the corporate office here in Plantation. So like my team is very diverse. Like literally, we're spread out among Plantation, Washington, and Boston. So actually, a few just came in from Boston this week, and they were spending their week with us and then flying back. So Chewy's very advanced with the remote work, and you know, as long as you're near a hub, they're more than good with that. So a lot of fun.
And some of them will ask, what's the best way that the students can connect? Do you like connecting on LinkedIn? Like, what's a good way? Like, if the students want to reach out, or would you rather them reach out to me and then what's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Add me on. Everybody should add me on LinkedIn. But yeah, if you're interested in something at Chewy, add me on LinkedIn. You can message me there, or you can send me an email. You don't go through you first. That's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? All right. Oh, we got one more.
Yeah, I heard you mentioned over so should we like predominantly just have workers or just like
Yeah. So it depends on your role. Even my prior roles, we were mostly remote. So at least I work 2 days in the office and the rest is all remote. But it's very fluid. Like if that one day I have to work remote instead of being in the office, I have the liberty to do that. It's not like a very strict policy, but generally speaking, the whole team comes in on, at least for us, it's Tuesday, Wednesdays, and we all kind of connect and go through stuff. That personal interaction is important. But there's other teams that really don't have to, like a lot of engineering folks spend most of their time working remote, and they maybe come in less. I know some teams that come in maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. It's really up to your working team and what you do. Some jobs can't work remote at all, like if they're in a DC, and some of us do the hybrid.
am I in person or?
I believe it's hybrid, the same. So it depends on, it goes back to the team you get put on, and you kind of fall into their work rhythm. So if you pick like supply chain, you get tied to a DC, then you have to be there every day. Versus if it's engineering, maybe once every 2 weeks. So that's the fun part about Chewy, is it's not cookie cutter. It's really depending on how that team works and how they build out that work-life balance. So it's great.
That's it. So can I give a
Right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
we brought you a little thank you gift there. Thanks for everybody online. We're gonna do our group photo. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.